So, try to not set these unrealistic expectations for people. And try to, also loosen your strong views about how things should be. We might think that, if someone loves me, they would definitely, whatever, be very happy if we meet them at the airport, or I don't know, send us flowers on our birthday, or whatever it is, whatever these things we have, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be that way. And there are many ways that people can, love each other, show love for each other, right? That aren't necessarily what we're thinking of. And so try to view it in a bit different way. I think that'll help. Okay. The other thing, this is just a practical tip, is the confusion that arises from text messaging and electronic communication. I've heard this, but I've never seen the data or research on it. But have you heard this? 90% of communication is nonverbal.
Yeah.
I haven't seen the source of it, but you hear this, and I kind of believe it. So here's another thing. When I was in London and my girlfriend was in New York, okay, we were fighting about this whole thing. I've abandoned her. I've put my career above her, above the relationship, all this stuff. So it was a common theme for us, the fact that of our geographical separation. Thank you. Anyway, at one point, after we had had all these arguments about it, she got sick, okay? Just with a cold. So I write her, get good rest, have some vitamin C, I hope you feel better, have the chicken soup, whatever, right? Trying to be nice, right? What can I do? I get a message back from her. Thank you so, right? The 3 O's so. Thank you so much for taking care of me. Okay. No, hold on. So I shouldn't prejudice you. It was just that. Thank you so much for taking care of me. Okay? Now, how then do I read it? How then do you read that? I read it like, thank you so much for taking care of me. You with me? I was thinking, who writes 3 O's on a so if they really mean it? I was going into all these existential debates with myself. Why would you? Oh, she must be being facetious. This must be another dig at me. She's actually saying that I don't take care of her at all, and therefore I'm just sending her this message, like, take vitamin C, thanks a lot, buddy. Right? Right? Drink some chicken soup. Who's gonna make the chicken soup for me? So in my whole mind, I'm thinking, this is an attack for me. Right? And so then, I write back as if I've been attacked. So then it just downward spirals from there. Anyway, the point is, what went on there, was my own fabrication, my own projection, right? So as much as possible, I think, as soon as, okay, yes, things are very, convenient with these, Facebook messengers, we send all these messages back and forth, it's convenient, okay, fine. But as soon as we get that first little, wait a minute, this could be interpreted in one way or another, try to have some real, either call or talk in person and try to sort it out as soon as possible. I think that'll help. What do you think? Anyway. So that's very problematic for many people. It's part of the reason why I became celibate. But in any case, try to learn from my mistakes. Now, the other thing, okay, so yes, this love and attachment for people, that's the big one. But I also know some of us, you know, there can be attachment for many things. And food or cigarettes or alcohol, something like this, is also a big one for many of us. Okay. So here again, Shantideva gives a very nice thought experiment where we imagine someone who has a dream of being a king for 100 years, and in that 100 years enjoys all the royal pleasures. And then you imagine someone who has a dream where they were king for one day. Okay? And then both of them wake up. So, who can we say is better off? Right? So in a similar way, alright, let me say this first. In Tongme Sangpo's 37 Practices of Bodhisattvas, he says that samsaric pleasures is like salt water. The more you partake of them, the more craving arises. Therefore, when something arouses attachment, to abandon it immediately is the practice of a bodhisattva. Okay? So the thing is, you know, again, we're not denying that having nice food or these things is, you know, a good, we're not denying that they are good. But it's more like this, you know. Again, Nagarjuna in the Precious Garden said that, you know, now I'm not sure if this is true, but the analogy is someone with leprosy, you know, this skin disease, if they go by a fire, the heat, I mean, not so close, but like, you know, kind of warm, it's soothing. It feels good, right? So Nagarjuna says, although there is some, you know, relief from a leper going by a fire, still it's better to be cured from leprosy, right? In the same way, although there is some pleasure from the, you know, samsaric happiness, it'd be better to gain liberation, right? So here the point is, as it says in the text on the monastic discipline, that we ought to give up the small pleasures to gain the great pleasures. But what we do is give up the great pleasures for the small pleasure. The great pleasure being enlightenment, liberation, right? So the real thing here is, you know, yes, it's nice to have good food, right? But what does it really cost us to get that? And remember, I'm not just talking about, you know, the pizza is 500 rupees, right? There's one time, Shanti, you were there. You know, I love Italian food, yes, but when I go to Bangalore, I often have Italian food because I live in the middle of nowhere and I don't get any Italian food. So I have this big craving for it every time I go to Bangalore. Ooh. Then we go to the restaurant. My favorite Italian restaurant, it's closed. Oh man. Right? So then we're on, okay, Google help me. Where's the next Italian restaurant? Then it's like, you know, 45 minutes, right? Across town. Then I gotta come all the way back. So it's basically 90 minutes of my life just in a car. So what? I could have pizza? Oh, maybe that's a good trade-off. No, it's not, right? The problem is that these things, they just take so much of our time that would be used for more meaningful activities, right? So the balance we have to have is, okay, given a choice, if it's there's good food, the one I like and the one I don't like, all right, we can take that. But once we start getting to, I have to travel all this way, wait for a table, and just takes up so much time, just for what? This small kind of, right, you eat the pizza and then whatever, 20 minutes later it's gone, right? So as they say, right, did I say this here? A moment on the lips, an eternity on the hips, right? Right. Forget about that. Anyway, so with all of these sense pleasures that we're so attached to, we've had them already so many times, right? There's nothing new in samsara, right? We've all had a nice meal, we've all had whatever. Watch the sunset in Goa. We've all been to the dance club, and we've all done everything under the sun. And then what do we think? We think one more time, then I'll be happy, right? No way. It's nuts. It's crazy. And so just seeing that, again, seeing the reality of those objects aren't going to bring us the satisfaction that we're truly seeking. And again, there is a way, because enlightenment, nirvana exists, that we can do something that's going to bring us lasting happiness, right? So, a lot of people, they say, oh, Buddhism is so pessimistic. When we look at the Buddhist teachings, even the first teaching, the Four Noble Truths, truth of suffering, right? Then when you look into it, there's 8 kinds of suffering, 6 kinds of suffering, 3 kinds of suffering, suffering of the lower realms, suffering of the higher realms, right? Then when I took a course at Kopan, and there was someone in the course that just got so, she once said, like, but haven't you ever seen the sunset? How can you say that's suffering? So here again, right? That word, dukkha, a little bit misleading to just say it's suffering, right? And I would admit that if the Buddha just taught the 2 noble truths, truth of suffering and the truth of the cause of suffering, all right, maybe a bit of a downer. But the point is, Buddha continued and taught the truth of the cessation of suffering. Truth of the cessation of suffering means there's a way to be totally free from all suffering forever. And also the 4th noble truth, the truth of the path leading to the cessation of suffering. So not only is there a way to be free from suffering, but here's how to do it. Here's the path, right? And so that should fill us with a lot of hope, right? And therefore, it's not pessimistic, but it's severely optimistic, right? But why then the Buddha first taught about the truth of suffering is because we have a very distorted view about thinking that samsaric pleasures are true happiness in and of themselves, right? So to dissolve the strong grasping we have to samsaric pleasures, that's why the Buddha hits us with the 8 sufferings, 6 sufferings, 3 sufferings, all these things, right? But my point is, even if we forget about liberation for the time being, we see from our own life, even in samsara, that these afflictive emotions, which, by the way, are the engine of samsara, they cause us so many problems, even for samsaric happiness. Okay? So even forget about liberation, but if you want to be happy in the world, if that's even possible, we know that these afflictions need to be taken care of. Yes? Alright, that's what I wanted to say about attachment. And then some bonus material on the Four Noble Truths. It's always a good topic at a Buddhist lecture, right? So, next.
Excuse me, can I ask you something?
You can.
Okay. Yesterday you told us about the meditation on a loving heart.
Uh-huh.
How does one generate a loving heart during meditation? Do we have to think something?
Yes.
What?
Love.
It's abstract.
No, I know. Okay. Well, hold on. Do you have to leave soon? No, you're here, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to field questions, and I'll talk about this in a bit.
Yeah.
But let me just cover the material I want to cover. Is that okay?
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, just quickly, because a lot of people have this thought of kind of self-contempt or difficulty loving ourselves, forgiving ourselves, right? Because the real thing is, I mean, some say before we can truly love others, we have to love ourselves, right? That's why I'm just holding off on your question, okay? It's not because I don't like you, and I know your daughter just got me the cake, so I have to be careful, okay? Don't bite the hand that feeds you chocolate cake. Okay, so here, all right. Yesterday we were talking about patience, right? Patience and forgiveness in relation to others. And the main strategy we used was separating the actor, right, the person that's done it, with the action, okay? Now, when we are angry, when we have attachment or greed or some kind of afflictive emotion in our mental continuum, then what have we done? We've harmed others, right? We've harmed ourselves. We've done all sorts of things. And why? Yeah? Because at that time, our mind was so out of control that it was almost like we were thrown into that way of acting. You know? Have we all done that? We've said that thing that we didn't want to say in hindsight, but at that moment it seemed like such a good idea to just really do it. We've done that, right? So, in that state, it was like we were crazy on some level. If we truly knew the consequences of that action, we wouldn't have done it, right? All right. So, when we think about it in relation to others, then we say, okay, yes, they did harm us, true. So don't negate that or deny it. But what happened? They too were under the strong sway of the afflictive emotions, right? And so Shantideva gives a beautiful analogy of if someone hits us with a stick, do we get mad at the stick? No way. Why? Because we get mad at the person wielding the stick. Yeah? So in a similar way, the very person wielding the stick is in turn wielded by the afflictive emotions. Right? Has no control. And then when you start to see that, it's like in the Christian context, there's this thought, hate the sin, love the sinner. Hate the sin, love the sinner. So it's like that, right? And in fact, in those times when we have the thought to retaliate, we think that the retaliation is going to somehow teach them a lesson, Or, I'll show him so he won't do that again. He'll think twice before he does that BS with me, right? Okay. But what is the motivation there? The motivation is we don't want that person to do that kind of stuff again, right? Okay. So let's just take this to its logical conclusion. Anyway, this thought came to me. I'm just going to give you some history how this thought came to me. There was one course I did up in Dharamsala, and there was a person there, and once we started talking about patience and love and forgiveness, he was very, it was very disturbing for him. Because actually he had been in a fight whereby he had been hit on the head with a beer stein, and then he was in a coma for some number of months, and even now when he walks with a limp. So he couldn't just entertain the notion of having forgiveness for the person that did it to him. Anyway, and this actually is why we start with people calling us names, because generally it's easier to do, and then once we learn how to do it with easy cases, we can do it with harder and harder ones. But in any case, I had this thought for him that when we have this, because he wanted to, if he thought if he saw that person again, he would, kill him. But the motivation is we don't want that person to engage in that kind of harm again, right? So if we take that to its logical conclusion, that person that harmed us, we don't want them to harm us again, or actually anyone again, right? And we want all of their actions to be most beneficial to others, right? And motivated by, love and compassion, and never motivated by afflictive emotions. So, who is that? Well, a Buddha or a Bodhisattva. Buddha, let's say, right? You with me? So here, in this case, when we try to have the mind of enlightenment, wishing to attain enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings, if we have this one difficult person, the enemy, then we don't have compassion for all sentient beings. That means no bodhicitta. But here we see the need, actually, even for that enemy, that for them to become enlightened is actually what we want. And that's the only way that they're going to not harm others. It's only the Buddha who is, perfect in conduct, right? So then, it's difficult at first, but we can see a way, logically, we have to accept that. Okay? Anyway, so that's forgiveness for others. Now, with ourselves, sometimes actually it's easier to forgive others than it is for ourselves. And it's easier for some to love others than ourselves. Okay? But here, we have to have that same kind of gentleness, right? First, understanding, yes, we are imperfect. Okay? There's a great book, and just the title of it is very thought-provoking and very good advice. Start where you are, by Pema Chodron, right? Start where you are. Yes, we have all of these aspirations to be a bodhisattva and a Buddha and do all these things, but where are we now? We get upset when we're not sold Marvin Gardens, right? So having a bit of just recognition of that. Okay, this is where I am now. I have afflictive emotions, and like the children playing around, doing things that they shouldn't be doing. We don't get upset with them, because why? They don't know any better, right? Also, actually everyone in samsara doesn't know any better on a very fundamental level. right? So also that same kind of playfulness as we have with a child misbehaving. Okay, yes, I see, yeah, attachment arises again, all right. So at one time there's a kind of acceptance of ourself, even with the faults. And then that person is still worthy of being happy, worthy of being loved, worthy to be free from suffering. Right? Why? Just because they're a living being. That's all the reason we need. Yeah? And then at the same time as we have acceptance for ourselves as we are, then yes, we have an aspiration to get better. But then have some recognition that for most of us, this is going to take a long time because our minds are habituated to afflictive emotions that are deeply ingrained within our mental continuum. And then, right, remember as we were talking about yesterday, we should celebrate the small victories, right? Even that one time we get criticized and we bite our tongue. Instead of criticizing them back, we don't. Wow. I did it once. If you can do it once, you can do it twice. If you do it twice, you can do it 3 times, and so forth, right? So instead of thinking of the other, 8 times and we didn't do something, we focus on the 2 or 3 times we have done something right and rejoice, become very happy about that, right? There's a Geshe, Ben or something, right, in Tibet, who at the beginning he would just set aside, like every time he had a virtuous thought, he would put a white stone, in a pile, and then every time he had a negative thought, he would put a black stone. So at the beginning it was like 50 black stones and 2 white ones, right? But eventually, then it changed. So this then I later came across, there's this management expert, right? Peter Drucker, have you heard of him? Peter Drucker. He said, what gets measured gets managed. Yeah? So this is a very helpful thing just for us in our daily life, is just, can we go from, I want to be a better person, what is that, right? To can we make things specific, okay? I am not going to criticize someone else when I get criticized. And then measure that. How many times have I gotten criticized today? How many times did I criticize them back? Right? Make it tangible. And then these things, I don't know, think about some of these goals, make them tangible, and then work on those. And then, that is what you can say then, okay, I'm a better person now than before. And here's the evidence. I'm not doing that anymore. And then you guys know all these other things. What is important for you, right? Some people have the swear jar, right? They don't want to swear anymore. So every time they swear, they put in $1 or 10 rupees into a jar that they give away. There's all these things that are common in just non-Buddhist circles. And I say go for it, right? Those very things that you think are the changes you want to make in your life, then you can do it. No problem. Okay? So, the self-contempt we talked about. Loving yourself means not identifying with those afflictive emotions and understanding even those very bad deeds that we've done, right? They were propelled by the afflictions that are not intrinsically part of our mind, right? No one is an angry person, right? But since we have an unsubdued mind, sometimes anger can arise. But no one is angry all the time, 24 hours a day. And based on how we treat our mind, then we can, reduce the anger attacks, right? By applying the antidotes to anger. Because the mind is impermanent. It is subject to causes and conditions like any other phenomena. Okay?